Alright guys, welcome to episode 1 of what I think will end up as my proudest series I'm starting on this channel. And what better way to start than with My Hero Academia Decoded. Before we get into the hidden metaphoric tale of the universe, let's first understand where each of us stand in regard to it. Like many shonen series, the protagonist of My Hero Academia has the main purpose as the main character to be that ultra-reliable underdog kid that every viewer can see themselves in. It's a common trope that we see everywhere, sometimes done well and sometimes not. Naruto. And despite the cliche that's used again and again, Deku's execution was phenomenal and had many aspects that we haven't seen anywhere before, resulting in a relatable story that can be pieced together, revealing exactly what Deku's purpose is and who Deku actually is. Well, the who part of the question is definitely easier, because like most shonen underdog protagonists, his job is to represent you. Every viewer is meant to be Deku, hence the ultimate relatability that's the goal for a huge percentage of shonen writers to hook the fan base on the main character. It's a tactic that's used often and somehow still remains fresh, because putting yourself in the protagonist's shoes or into the protagonist's universe are probably the major reasons why people got into anime in the first place, unlocking that door for you to become the greatest Pokemon master, the greatest ninja, the greatest pirate, or in the new generation, the greatest hero. The openings of My Hero Academia further stress this point, that the protagonist is meant to be you, as while the first opening follows Deku showing his trials and tribulations growing from a nothing to a something, because the first step in relating to a character is understanding the character and what mindset pushes him forward. In the second opening, which reflects on the first half of the second season being the tournament arc, as I've mentioned in my frame-by-frame review on the actual opening, that you see how Deku is completely emotionless and static in his growth, and how he's meant to represent the viewers completely, and how none of it are about himself as a character. So I won't go into detail about that here again, but I will link up that analysis at the end. And finally, the third opening is somewhere in between, showing how little Deku's amassed massive power and how he's grown to use it, revealing more of Deku's journey while at the same time not showing personal emotions past determination, acting as a perfect balance between the last two openings, because at this point we know the protagonist and everyone sees themselves in him at least to an extent, so the story forward will be following both the viewer and the protagonist. I believe many of the fans of My Hero Academia noticed this in the three openings, which despite very little symbolism are still universally loved. They're a very my type of opening that hypes you for the episode and that accomplishes its goals simply, just like the series does. And it's also the type of opening you will never see on Mother's Basement's channel because of its simplistic beauty. However, something about the three openings I think most fans did not see is how they represented each arc of their runtime so perfectly and effectively on a metaphoric level as well. The first 12 episodes or the first season of My Hero Academia, as I've mentioned in opening 1, has to show us who Deku is and why we'll relate to him. And I'll start by putting things a little bit into perspective. Before I started the series and I looked at its summary, what it was going to be about, it said that the protagonist lives in a world where most people have superpowers and he's one of the unfortunate few that don't. Yet, his mind is still set on becoming a hero, with an immediately fascinating premise that I knew just had to draw me into the series, following the ultimate underdog, is what I was expecting, but what I got was completely different. I assumed quirks would be a massive edge in battle, but not more, because I expected Deku to take the role of the quirkless student that would use his strategies and brains over brawn to overcome every obstacle. So when he got his little gift from All Might, I was honestly disappointed for a moment. But then again, that's why I'm here making anime YouTube videos and he makes the actual anime. On a metaphoric level, I was wrong. Because if My Hero Academia would have taken my turn of events, there would have definitely been more interesting aspects. However, the ultimate message of Deku would be lost completely, and through that, the world crumbles as well. The way Deku is developed shows how it's purely determination that's bringing him up the ladder, as it's clearly stated that he does not fare the best intellectually in his entire class. He's not that much above average, and that seemingly was the only one thing he possessed. This is where his hero files play a role in this message, because he's doing something that literally anyone can do if they just put some time and effort into it. This telling everyone that if you want to get somewhere, you can, and there's nothing stopping you except for you. Just get up and go. This represents everyone born at an equal or lower standard than someone else, and it's telling you that if you're a little meticulous, you will triumph in the end. This becoming the ultimate anti-nobility setting that I will come back to, that everyone can relate to. While on the topic, this is one of the flaws Naruto had at attempting to flaunt an underdog protagonist while birthright means everything, as proven by literally every powerful ninja in the series. Not that I'm saying that Deku's dad won't be a total badass, because the missing father turns badass trope is a common one. However, Howard's young Midoriya has not inherited. This is also a perfect transition to describe the rivalry between him and his major rival Bakugou, which boils down to exactly this. I'll get into the genius rivalry with Todoroki soon, but for For now, here's what Bakugou depicts. He was there from the beginning as a childhood friend that betrayed him due to a difference in prestige and power, resulting in Bakugou remaining Deku's major rival throughout the story. While Bakugou deserves an entire video like this to himself, I'm going to focus on how he helps tell Deku's story and how he develops the universe's story. Being that Deku is you, Bakugou becomes your ultimate antithesis, representing every type of personality that may clash with yours. A childhood friend that trampled on your feelings, a rival in strength where he has it all and you have nothing, at least as far as the first arc, which is what I'm dealing with now, where he has prestige and you don't, where he has the same goal as you, but has a path already paved to get there, where, as it's revealed, he's the most intelligent in the entire UA class, where despite all of Deku's calculations, Bakugou can do it instantaneously in middle of a fight, and most importantly, we come back to the fundamental feeling where quirks in the My Hero Academia universe are a representation of nobility, status, and heritage in our world, something that people are just born with, despite not having to work to get there. In MHA, Bakugou was already born as a noble, and Deku represents the real-world problem that is being a serf, being an unprivileged person of minority status, because every human being, from their own individual perspective, there is someone of higher class than they are, whether they come from a rich family, or whether prejudice is afflicted upon them for their race. Deku, in this rivalry, represents and becomes anyone who feels unjustly inferior in any way. And joking aside, most of us fall into this category, being that everyone watching this video is a filthy weeb. In case you don't see where I'm going with this, becoming a hero is a metaphor for joining the upper class. Not that I'm saying upper class equals good or anything of the like. On the contrary, I may be getting ahead of myself. I'm just bringing to light it's considered high status. Now, like many of the people in high status in our everyday life, in our normal world, there is an ego issue. So let's understand what Stain represents in our world. Despite the short runtime, the Hero Killer Stain arc was my favorite arc thus far of My Hero Academia, as far as its plot and metaphoric situations. Stain's backstory, to put simply, because frankly you already know it if you're watching this video, is he wanted to be a hero, but was crushed by the corrupt mindset of the egos of these heroes. That's what drove him to become the Hero Killer. I talk a little bit more at length about the hero versus ego mentality in my analysis on the Stain fight itself, and just to clear up any misconceptions I've been seeing on the internet, no, Stain is not an anti-hero. He borderline isn't even an anti-villain. He's a tenacious villain with reasonings behind his actions. That doesn't negate his villainy. That just makes him a good villain. As far as this metaphor goes, note Stain has an extremely feeble quirk, almost to the point of futility, being that, as I mentioned in my sarcastic fact video on Stain, if he'd douse his knives in poison, it would be way more effective than his actual quirk. As an example, in this scene, he would have beaten Todoroki, and there would be no time limit to this paralysis. Therefore, the metaphor behind quirks applies to him as well as it does to Deku. As people are born with their quirk, it represents their birthright, and what status they're born into. Stain, having a near useless quirk, is born into the minority underdog status, and like Deku, he's down to try his hardest to make something of himself, and his goal was to push himself into the higher class and become a hero. This is why Stain was crushed. He saw the corruptness of the higher class, and he struck home as a brilliant villain. Because in our simple world, while there are your occasional All Mights and Dekus, the unfortunate majority of the upper class also falls before ego. This is why I'm saying Stain is a villain, because you can't just go out and kill egotistical upper class people left and right to try for some sort of sense of balance. And newsflash, it doesn't accomplish anything even if you're killing bad people. In fact, Endeavor saved many lives, but the mindset is certainly understandable. Also notice where Deku stands and what he accomplishes in this arc in comparison to opening 3 as part of a team. Anyway, my favorite example to this metaphoric storyline dwells within Todoroki, who I have mentioned in a previous video to be the greatest rival in anime, despite not being a long-lasting rival. And the representation in him is much simpler to see. Todoroki was accepted into UA literally because he came from a prestigious family. In the actual narrative of My Hero Academia, immediately showing what a top hero's status actually is. Furthermore, he was born with an insanely powerful quirk, representing his inborn nobility. Even by default, he does not need to try as hard as Mineta, for example, to accomplish this same goal. For me, his development was the highlight so far of the anime, and his narrative in the tournament arc made him my favorite rival ever. Because of his hatred directed towards his father, the ultimate ego hero, as Stain clearly pointed out, being the corrupt upper class, to the extent that he was willing to put his profession before his family, as seen in the way he treated his wife and child, as unfortunately also seen all too often in our own universe, putting money and fame before family and life in general. The result created Todoroki, a being fighting against himself, to only use half of his quirk's ability, representing the rejection of his corrupt heritage and the rejection of his inborn ability, to prove to himself that he can progress in this world without these things, and with his own power. This is the beauty of the fundamental pyramid that the tournament arc is founding on, with Deku, Bakugou, and Todoroki each representing a different archetype of person, as far as inborn status and mental status, with every clash between these three representing the deadlock between their distinct personalities. Not that I have the time right now to go through every interaction in the tournament, but depending on how much you guys like this video, maybe I'd do another part decoding the tournament arc in more detail. But the climax was undeniably Deku versus Todoroki, a picture-perfect dissection of this metaphor where Deku sacrificed his physical victory for his emotional victory, being born from nothing and accepting his place with no ego to protect and nothing to prove. His archetype is the only possible way to break through to a Todoroki archetype, to be grateful for what he has and to make something great out of it. Nobility isn't evil on its own, it's how it's used that often leads to corruption. Deku's purpose in this fight, in a nutshell, is the essence of all might. And before I get to him, Shinsou is another perfect example of this. Born with an extremely powerful quirk, but seemingly for the opposite side. It didn't help him progress in the academy itself, because of the all too realistic selfishness that was the entrance exam, immediately geared towards certain people, even when Shinsou is hell stronger than Mineta, as just an example. Furthermore, even though he did absolutely nothing wrong, and followed the rules of the tournament to the T, he's looked at in a negative light by everyone, being the cast and the fan base, as we looked through Deku's eyes. And this was a tremendous injustice. Looking at him in one way solely because of his birthright is the quintessential racism that My Hero Academia is telling all of us to pay attention to. Because until the end of the fight, both the fan base and Deku, who represents the fan base, positively hated him purely by appearance alone. So too, the fan base and Deku simultaneously started to like him after we learned more about him, and after we saw the contents of the book, and not just judging it by its cover. Back to Deku's story, he was that one single candidate hand-selected by All Might to inherit one for all his ultimate legacy, and the counterpart required for defeating All for One, which is the main topic I will be decoding in part 2 of this video, which I hope to be out next week, being that the editing process has already begun. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed. Have yourself a most wonderful evening. Feel free to check out my other videos on My Hero Academia, be it sarcastic critique, be it analysis. This is the first decoded video that I've done, and I would like to make it an actual series and a big part of my channel. So after I do these two on My Hero Academia, I already have a script ready for Gurren Lagann and Death Note, as well as plans for several other series, decoding why a series makes you feel like it does, and what that series represents. So until then, feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.